Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from relationship advice. Our first post is by Throwaway. My 43F kids constantly choose my husband's 43M girlfriend 29F over me, and he won't intervene. How can I get him to back me up? My husband and I were together for 8 years before having our first son, and things changed drastically after we became parents. My desire level died because of exhaustion, being a new mother, etc. Although he did help a lot, I just never got the same level of desire back. And after the second son, we had to have a conversation because it was becoming a major issue. I really didn't care about sex anymore. Although I was willing to go along with it, there were some lines I drew that I hadn't before. He came out as a furry a year into our relationship, and I went along with it. But after children, I decided that it made us incompatible, and I didn't want to partake in it anymore. And I suggested if he wanted more sex and someone who was willing to pretend to be various animal characters, he get a girlfriend. He found one after about a year online, and although I did initially suggest it, I wasn't happy. I didn't believe that he could find someone because he has ADHD and might be slightly autistic. She is very eccentric, and according to her parents, she is diagnosed autistic, but she is a very sweet woman and gets along with everyone. After a while, I agreed that she could move in with us, and things were going well. But over the last 2 years, there have been a lot of issues that I don't like. 1. Husband spends more time with her than with me, and they send each other cutesy texts, which he never does with me. 2. Her parents are well off and buy my kids expensive gifts that make my parents, and to a lesser extent his parents, their real grandparents, look bad. 3. The kids seem to like her more than me sometimes, for example. She spends a lot of time teaching them how to draw, which especially our oldest son loves. 4. She wears animal accessories in public. Last week we had a snapping point where we went out for lunch after picking up the kids for school, and I suggested we go to get haircuts for the kids, and then go to the specialty cheese shop that is in the mall where the hairdressers are. My husband wanted to go to the comic book store instead, and girlfriend agreed as she wanted to get a bobblehead. I asked the kids directly if they would rather go with me or girlfriend, and they both chose girlfriend. It just seems as if I am falling out of favor with my husband and kids, and I want advice on how to reverse this. Since we are married, I expect my husband to back me up on issues like this. How can I make that happen? Our next post is by Throwaway. We 34F35M opened our relationship, and now I think my husband prefers our girlfriend. We have been together for 14 years. We have a 7 and 3-year-old together. 3 years ago, husband got, well, I don't want to say bored, but I'm not sure what else to call it. So after a while, mostly begging on his part, I accepted to introduce a third into our marriage. We can call her Harper, 25F. Husband knew Harper before everything. She's his sister's friend, another awkward story, and it's been 3 years. I love Harper. She's like crazy sweet. The children love her. We do girl trips, split everything 50-50, go shopping. Harper doesn't leave me out of anything. She's always going out of her way to include me, to spoil the children and make sure everything is equal. I don't know what to do because I love Harper. I just want my husband to need me like he used to. I want to be my husband's favorite. All advice welcome. Our next post is by Throwaway. My M27 wife, F26, crossed the only line I ever set with her. How can I forgive her? My wife and I have known each other for 10 years and got married in 2018. We have very different lifestyles. She's a very devout Mormon and I am not religious. We found some way to make it work. It was a hard road, but there are some challenges still, but we love each other very much. She has never met my biological mother. My parents were divorced long before I met her, and I broke contact with my mom after I turned 18. My mom was extremely abusive towards me growing up. She physically abused me and my sister regularly, and tried to frame it on my father. She was able to manipulate a doctor to give me multiple medications growing up, and she'd steal the meds. Her dirt boyfriend also tried to be abusive to me too. I cut my losses and cut all contact with my mother and her family. So did my sister. My parents, dad and stepmom, didn't approve of my wife at first because of her religion, but they get along now. When my wife asked me when she'd meet my mom, I told her she never would. She's a violent and terrible woman, and she has no place in my life, and I didn't want her involved in ours. I also told her not to contact anyone in my mom's family. Recently, my mom showed up at my work, which she had no knowledge of. It got ugly, and police had to be called to remove her from the property. It was such an embarrassment. When I got home, I told my wife, and she just had her "oh crap" look on her face. I asked what that was about. She confessed she reached out to my mom and told her where I worked because my mom wanted to make amends. My wife's beliefs are that everyone deserves forgiveness and doesn't believe something could be unforgivable. I told her that violated the one thing I told her was out of bounds and didn't even tell me until crap hit the fan. She of course has been apologetic. I told her we'd get there, but I needed to get through it. I've been sleeping in the office at home, and we've barely spoken since. We are supposed to travel to her parents for Thanksgiving, but I'm really considering staying home with the dogs so I can sort myself out. I'm not sure how to get over this. Our next post is by Throwaway. Trigger warning, mention of miscarriages. My 32F husband, 53M, wants a divorce. How do I tell him I'm pregnant without coming off manipulative? So recently my husband told me he wants a divorce. As a bit of background, my husband, we'll call him Jordan, was a family friend, and after a bit of messing around, I ended up pregnant with our daughter, 14F. We ended up having a good old shotgun wedding, courtesy of my highly religious family. The topic of families came up afterwards, naturally, and we both make our stances clear. Jordan wants a big family and always has. I'm talking mother, father, 7 children and a dog type deal. Meanwhile, I wasn't super opposed to the idea of one, though I felt 7 was a bit much. Anyway, life goes on as we settle into newly married life. He gets a promotion and is working longer hours. We decide I quit my job to start caring for our daughter full-time so we can save more money from daycare costs. And when she turns 5 and starts kindergarten, we decide to start trying for another child. Well, roughly 2 years into this, with no results, I get cancer. We put the family thing on hold and I opt for treatment. My doctor did warn me that the chemo drugs I was on had a high risk of causing permanent changes to my fertility, but we decide to go through with it anyway. There was a rather scary period of time where it looked like treatment was making it worse, but I managed to pull through. Shortly after, me and Jordan get back to the family planning. Unfortunately, in this time, it very much seemed like the infertility risk hit, as I couldn't keep a pregnancy. The few times I did get pregnant usually ended with a miscarriage, with the one time I made it to full term ending in a stillbirth. Well, after a few months of this, he tells me that he's sick and tired of getting his hopes up only to be let down, and that if I get pregnant, I should just not tell him until I was 3 to 4 months along, since the risk of a miscarriage would go down significantly then. I agree and follow this rule. As of last month, I noticed that Jordan becomes distant. He takes longer shifts at work, he isn't as intimate with me anymore, and he pretty much ignores our daughter and me completely, while before he always made sure to at least greet and hug her, even if he was running a bit late. And then about a week ago I get served with divorce papers while he's at work. He refuses to tell me why he wants one and is insistent that it isn't a problem I can fix. The only problem is that I'm pregnant and was planning to tell him the news the literal day I was served, since I had passed the 4-month mark. Now, however, I'm worried about how to tell him. I have to disclose that I'm pregnant on the paperwork, since that affects possible child support and custody, and I don't want to lie to a judge. But I also want to tell him myself instead of having him find out through the court. My issue is that I'm worried that if I tell him now, it'll look like I'm trying to manipulate him into canceling the divorce and force him to stay with me. But if I wait for it to be mentioned during the divorce, it'll look like I was trying to hide it and trap him into paying more money for a child he wouldn't be aware of. Can anyone help me out on the best way to tell him without it coming off this way? I appreciate any advice you can give me. Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.